Well, good morning and welcome to Our Stories. Our guest today is Pixie Fennessey. And Pixie's had a very interesting life, and we've done some talking here together, and I think you'll find the things that she has to share about herself today really quite interesting. Pixie, as we've talked, you've expressed to me the strong commitment and life belief system that you've had about social justice issues. And you found that in your classroom teaching, you were able to incorporate the themes of caring for others and mutually shared responsibility that we should hold for each other. You certainly personified that belief when you began to work with the orphanage in Kenya and led to your involvement with Stand Up for Grace. I think it's worth having you explain to our audience how you came to be the person you are. So one of the things you told me was that you and your parents were quite involved in a Presbyterian church for the early part of your life, and you found that to be a very meaningful experience to you. And so tell us a little bit about that and what it was like.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, my parents both grew up Presbyterian, and my grandmother was Presbyterian. In fact, she taught Sunday school with children, I don't remember the age group, for 22 years. Mm-hmm. And she was very, very proud of that. And we moved from Bloomington Normal to Danville for my dad's. He went from a principal to assistant superintendent of schools there. And the church there was, really socially active. Of course, the Vietnam War was going on. So our church supported, protests and Mothers Against War and this and that and the other. And so it was like this church in a lot of ways. There was a lot of social activism going on, right, and a lot of voices against some of the things that were going on in the world.
And you were very active in that, you and your family both.
Yeah, my parents were real active in it. I was only, I was there from 4th grade to 8th grade. Yeah. So my activities were to be in the choir, which I can't sing, but that was one of the things. And then I did learn how to play the guitar, and we had a folk service. And then we had officers in our Sunday school class, and I guess I was one of the officers. Mm-hmm. But church there was an important part of our family's life, right, at that time.
And you also said that your parents were, people that you didn't feel were really prejudiced, and that they really helped instill values of kindness and acceptance.
Well, I think that, they had friends that were from India, and they had friends that were African American. And it was kind of funny when I started teaching at Richland, and I know you're going to ask me more about this later, but I found out that my dad had actually hired Janelle Norman and her husband at the time to come and teach in Danville. And I think knowing some of the teachers he's hired and knowing who their friends were made me feel that they were not prejudiced people. Yeah.
So then as you're getting up into high school, your dad changed jobs, and you moved to another town, and your parents made a pretty big change religiously in that move as well.
Yeah, my dad was superintendent of schools in Effingham. That's why we moved there. And my sister was attending the University of Illinois, and she got involved with an Assembly of God church there. And my parents followed her into that. In fact, my sister was a missionary in the Philippines for 35 years for the Assembly of God Church. I'm not sure, they just got hooked on that. I think my dad was, because he was a veteran, he was upset with some of the things that our church in Danville supported, like, the protests against the war and this and that. I'm not sure how much that had to do with it, but once they went to the Assembly of God Church with my sister, everything kind of changed.
Yeah.
And they continued, they were for some years members of the Christian church there, but I don't know what happened. They started going to Assembly of God churches then. My dad, when he retired, became an ordained Assembly of God minister, and they moved to Chicago where he worked in a church there. But when they joined that church, then our relationship changed drastically. I was afraid of some of the things that happened in these Pentecostal services. There was one lady who supposedly was possessed, and there was an exorcism done, and that was a real turnoff to me. So I continued to go to. We argued about it so much. It was finally, well, you go to, as long as you go to church, that's okay. So I went to the Presbyterian church for a while in Effingham.
Yeah. So you were going through high school in the 70s, and it was a time where there was a lot of some social unrest things and social consciousness stuff going on. And were there things that came out of that you think that had an impact on you?
Well, I was much younger, like when Martin Luther King died, but I remember that really was upsetting to me. Of course, both Kennedys had passed away, and that was upsetting. And so living in a small town that was all white at the time, there wasn't really like groups you could join to support certain social actions. So I guess I just expressed my opinion and read a lot of books. I remember doing a biography. We had to do a book report, and I did a biography on Martin Luther King. And my English teacher told me I was the first person, and she had taught for probably 25, 30 years, that had ever chose to do a black person for a book report.
Yeah.
So
you completed high school, and then you went on to Eastern?
No, I completed high school and goofed around for a few years. And I was working at a facility that had a lot of mentally disabled and mentally ill people in it. And I got interested in psychology. So I started taking a few night classes from Lakeland. And it took me several years to get through Lakeland because of the way I did it. And my parents had a rule that I had to live in a dorm for them to pay for me to go to college. And at that time, Lakeland had no dorms, and I was not willing to do that. I liked my freedom. So then I went to Eastern, and I worked my way through my bachelor's, and then I got a graduate assistantship, which helped me afford my master's degree then, because they paid for everything.
Well, you told me that while you were at Eastern, you met a professor named Bill Kirk, who kind of probably maybe recognized that you might need a mentor, and was glad to step into that role with you. What kind of things, do you feel like he did or offered or provided to you that were meaningful to you?
Well, he was somebody I could always talk to about anything, and he was the funniest teacher I've ever had, probably one of the funniest people I've ever known. And I'm attracted to people who are funny. And I was his grad assistant, and so we got to be very close. But I think the biggest influence he had on me was his teaching style. I loved the way he taught. He would give a lot of personal information out and make a lot of jokes, and yet, they had old movies and stuff, but they didn't have the media we have now. So lots of times he would actually take on different roles of people or situations that we were talking about. And so his teaching style led me, I think, to really pursue teaching, and I always tried to be like him when I taught.
Kind of model yourself after.
And once I went to Lakeland, I knew I wanted to teach at a community college. because I thought, this is life. You know,
Yeah.
you get to stand up and talk about what you want to do. You get these holidays off. But my style of teaching definitely came from him.
Yeah, okay. And another person who had a pretty strong impact on you was Larry Klugman, who gave you some rules to live by.
Yeah, Larry Klugman, when I went to Richland in 1996, I'd been teaching in Iowa for 10 years, and then I wanted to move back home. And so he was very, very funny, and I'm sure some of the people probably that are going to listen to this probably know him. He was very well known in the community, besides his sense of humor. But there were some things he told me that I should go by in my life. One was pick your battles, you know.
Yeah.
And I had never really thought of that before. I mean, that makes common sense, but there's some things you just don't have to get involved in.
Yeah.
And then the other thing he told me was sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, which I like that.
Yeah.
And then those were the two major things. But he was also very supportive of Hope Club, which was helping out people everywhere, which the students and I and the other advisors started at Richland once we got back from Kenya our first time.
Yeah.
And it was to raise money for the orphanage, but to also raise money for different nonprofit organizations here. And he was very, very supportive of that. He wasn't the advisor by any means, but he was very supportive of that.
And a third person you mentioned to me that you thought was really someone who was kind of placed in your life path and impacted you in terms of modeling her commitment and perseverance was Janelle Norman.
Yeah. Janelle was, we didn't know this till we were at a Christmas party and we started talking, and we put it together through our conversation that my dad had hired her in Danville, and had hired her then, you know, her former husband there. And so that kind of formed a bond because she really respected my father for, you know, some of the things he had done. And then she got me very much involved in a lot of her, or a lot of the things that she did. So I was a member of the NAACP for about 10 years, and the last probably 7 years I was on the executive board of the NAACP. So that got me involved in a lot of different things. Some were programs, some were marches. And I just really respected her because she never backed down. And she was treated badly many times by people because of her positions on things.
Yeah.
And so I always wanted to be strong like her. Plus, we were just really good friends. We would go out and have fun and laugh and carry on. And we did a learning community together a couple times where there were 3 classes with the same students. I did psychology, and then she did developmental reading, and then Deb Yaden did developmental writing. So that brought us together also, but I have a lot of respect for her.
Well, Pixie, you spent most of your teaching career teaching young adults.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I have to ask, from that, how did you get involved with, you know, young children in an orphanage in Africa, okay?
Well, Mike Huff, who was an advisor, a part-time advisor at Richland, and he was in charge of the Pride group, which is people respecting individual differences equally. And his club would go to various places. At the time, there were a couple of gay bars in Decatur, and they would pass out information about AIDS and where people could go to get tested and that kind of thing, and other places. And the students that were in that group said, well, let's go somewhere where we can work with people who have been more affected than perhaps people in our community. And so Mike got on the internet and found one of those volunteer vacation places. And so one of the places you could volunteer was at this orphanage. And then the powers that be said he had to take a teacher with him and make it into a class. So he asked me if I was interested, and I said yes. And then we went over there in 2005. When we got home, we started Hope Club, and then I started going every summer and almost every Christmas. And when I'm there, I do volunteer teaching with the little kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And I teach things like creative arts and PE, which is kind of funny because I'm very unathletic. But they don't have very much room for PE, so
Yeah.
I had to get creative with that. So I have taught little ones, but
Yeah.
not academics. And I just fell in love with the children.
Sure.
Now, since I'm older, got divorced, moved back to Decatur and this and that. I haven't been there now for a year and a half. And I'm not really sure I will always support. I'm the president of Stand Up for Grace. I'm the founder with 2 other people. I will always support the orphanage, but there's the embassy. I'm in a program where the embassy sends you messages about, travel and when it's not safe to travel. And I think as I get older, I need to take care of my health.
A little more cautious.
Yeah, and I broke my hip over there in
Yeah.
2018 and ended up with 5 surgeries, which the church was wonderful. They brought me lunch every day and stuff like that. But I will continue to raise funds. I'm not so sure. I'm not going to be going back every summer and every Christmas, though, for sure.
Well, you shared with me kind of a motto that the orphanage has, and just as a closing thing, I'd like to share that because I don't know, I found it quite interesting. And it's James 1:27, and it's may sound a little bit different because it's from the Message Bible, and it reads like this: real religion, the kind that passes muster before God the Father, is this: reach out to the homeless and loveless in their plight, and guard against corruption from the godless world.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's the motto, only from a different Bible version, which
Right.
specifically talks about orphans. But that's the motto of the orphanage, and that really stuck home and made me think about my grandma again and how she worked with children. And once you've lived in the slum where my apartment was, I was within walking distance of the orphanage. Still am. I still have an apartment there. Your whole realm of thinking changes. I don't need to have a good car. I need to have one that drives. I don't need to have a big house. All of that changes, and it's because other people need help, and I'm fortunately in a position where I can give some help.
yeah. Well, Pixie, it's been very interesting, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share with us about your life.
Thank you. It's been nice to do.
Okay.